Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
with your host, the seer of the beer, Chris Powell.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month, we invite a guest author to read their works and talk about writing while sipping a beer specially paired to their work. This month's guest is Hiram Johnson. So sit back,
Pop a cold one,
and dive into some books.
and brews.
Welcome to episode number 76 of Books and Brews, this month with Hiram Johnson. So, Laura, how have things gone for you this month,
Well,
other than frenetic?
Right. It's always frenetic around here. Well, some of the things I plant, I don't necessarily sow. I planted a whole bunch of seedlings, got nothing. And
Wow.
yet, the things we didn't plant, we're getting in abundance. We actually have 2 pumpkin plants that
Man, that is
Yeah.
huge.
they're huge. It's taking over my poor dog's pasture out there, and I'm debating, do I want pumpkins? I don't know how many I can use. I've been working while you're upstairs just sitting at your desk doing nothing.
What I do up there.
I, however, have been working hard, taking care of these pumpkins and zucchinis and all that fun stuff. And
Whoa.
we had a visit from a college friend, so that was exciting. And went to visit the caverns in the Gap Cave. So, and that was a very interesting place. It's one of the few places I've gone in where they have no lights at all, so they give you flashlights.
And didn't you become a
Oh yes,
starlet this month?
I am a starlet, believe it or not. And you better believe it.
Right, yeah.
Anybody who doubts that. So yeah, I was it a couple months ago, I starred as the unnamed shopper in a film that had other stars who actually had lines, but
Right.
you know, I was the real star. I know I was. They built it all around me, picking up my corn chips or whatever I picked up. And that film, it's a short comedy. It was entered into the Knox Comedy Film Festival. It's called Bread and Buttered Up, and it actually took second place. So we went to see that last night. And the truth of the matter is, because, you know, I write fiction, so I am always pretty honest about when I'm making stuff up. The truth is I was a blur in the background. You could barely see me. And so I filmed it on my camera as it was playing on the big screen. And I had to go millimeter by semi-millimeter. And I finally found this blurry shot of someone in a white t-shirt. And I went, that's me.
That's right.
So I'm
great.
a star. As sort of an unseen star, but my name was in the credits. And that was pretty exciting.
So back in the late 80s, I think it was, I played an extra in a Joe Piscopo comedy.
Fantastic.
Dead Bang. I played a cop, and I was on there probably for like 2 seconds. And when I show it to people, I always say, okay, don't blink, because I'm gonna be coming up here in just a minute. And I was on there for a couple of seconds. But last month, just a few weeks ago, I won first place for Best Trailer at the Hard Faith Film Festival. Let me get that right. Hard Faith Film Festival in Hollywood. And then just not long after that, my trailer, which is based off the book, won for Best Historical Feature at
fantastic.
the Faith and Family Film Festival Screenwriting Awards. So, and one other accolade, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I won for Best Experimental Film in the ARF, or Around Paris, Film Festival, which takes place in Berlin this November. So we're planning on going there. So I'm really excited about my story, which is based off the book.
That is great.
That's
And
really wonderful.
So you need to tell me what you read.
I read something. What did I read?
I don't know. I guess you didn't read anything.
Well, I've been reading a book by Nicholas Taleb called Anti-Fragile,
Still
which
working.
is, following up The Black Swan and some other things. So what I also get to do is, because I'm an adjunct over at Lincoln Memorial, I get to read books on technology management, which is what I teach. So, other than that, nothing exciting that I've been reading. But how about yourself?
So I finally had time, because we were making a long drive yesterday to see the film. I finally finished your book, Michael Modzelewski, Wildlife Misadventures of a Cosmo Bachelor. And, there were parts that I said, my sons better never do that. I confess, but you came to the right conclusion in the end. So, and of course, I read Reason to Fight by our guest. So,
And who is our guest this month,
Hiram
Laura?
Johnson is retired law enforcement, and my son, I just learned, is becoming a cop in the Twin Cities area. So I'd love to ask you a million questions about that. And I believe you are currently teaching criminal justice as an adjunct, and an author, a father, a creator. His book, Reason to Fight, A Search for Truth, is a surprising tale of a family mystery. And I'm excited to get into that. For now, what is our first drink?
We have a wonderful drink, I think, for the first reading. So I was taken in the story by the 14-year-old who called himself kind of a blank slate. And I was inspired by that because, I think many of us as teenagers probably see ourselves as that. And so I actually found a drink called the Blank Slate, which happens to have a number of interesting ingredients. And I'm going to start with some Jägermeister, which whenever you have a drink that starts with Jägermeister, it kind of probably takes you back to college days, or in law enforcement, arresting people who are in their college days. But
Right.
So we put a couple of ounces of Jägermeister in the shaker. Then we put in some grapefruit juice.
That sounds a little sour.
It can be, but I'm going to be sweetening it up here fairly shortly. And I will actually throw in a bit of lemon juice. This is fresh squeezed because that's how I roll. And then we put in some ginger syrup. So this is syrup I made from fresh ginger and sugar and water. And so I will shake all of these things. Get a couple of rocks glasses with some ice. I'll strain that into the glass, and then I will top it with just a little bit.
It looks delicious.
It does look good. Although I hate grapefruit juice, so that makes me a little nervous.
Well, let's see what happens. Cheers.
That's actually surprisingly not sour. I would have expected something very different, but that's tasty.
Very good.
That's good for the end of. I think this is a good summer drink or fall drink.
It could very well be.
It has some flavors that seem very fallish.
That ginger, I think,
probably
really does it.
Right.
I think we're probably ready for reading number one.
Okay, so every couple years or so, the family would take a drive from Southern California to back home to Mississippi, where mom and dad were from. And this year was around 1970, so I would have been around 14 years old. And the reading starts with nobody speaking in the car and only the brothers Johnson in the background. I became pensive. I started to wonder about Daddy's mysterious missing family. I studied the back of Daddy's head and tried to figure out why he was so secretive about his past. You only had to look at him to wonder where he'd come from. He was as fair as most white men, so he must have had a white father, but he wouldn't talk about it. The most he'd ever told me about his family was that his deceased mother, Bernice, was a beautiful Black woman. Daddy had an older brother named George who had come to visit one time when I was maybe 5 years old. George was a very dark Black man, and I puzzled over how he and Daddy could be related. Later, Mama told me that Uncle George and Daddy had different fathers. When I pressed her for more details, Mama said that was all she knew. As we piled on the miles, I had plenty of time to ponder. I was over 14 years old, but felt as if half of me was a blank slate. To know who I really was, I needed Daddy to tell me who he was, and where he had come from. I closed my eyes and wondered if he'd ever open up to me. It was dark outside when I woke up. Everybody was asleep except for Daddy. Even the brothers Johnson had been put to rest for the night. I looked out the windshield and saw the headlights hit a sign that said, Shreveport, 10 miles. I figured Daddy intended to drive through the night until we got to Jackson, which was still another 300 miles. Everything was quiet in the car. I felt as if I could hear Daddy's every heartbeat and feel his every breath. I decided to use the moment to my advantage. Do your folks live in Jackson, Daddy? Daddy stuck a cigarette in his mouth, then flipped open his Zippo. The tobacco fizzled when he held the flame to it. He flipped the lighter shut and inhaled, the cigarette's orange tip glowing in the darkness. He exhaled in a long, slow breath. Daddy, I began. Daddy tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. Go back to sleep, Lonnie, he said, calling me by my nickname. I'm wide awake. Then just try closing your eyes and shutting your mouth, he said. Or maybe shutting your eyes and closing your mouth. Ain't tired. Is that how they teach you to talk at that private school I'm going broke sending you to? No, sir, I said, falling back on the respectful tone Daddy appreciated. He took another long drag on his pale mail and the smoke shot out through his nostrils as if he were an angry dragon. My mother was named Bernice, he finally said. She was a beautiful Black woman. But who was she? What was she like? What did she do? She worked, she cooked, she cleaned, she took care of her kids. Daddy flipped his cigarette out the window. In the darkness and stillness of the moving car, I felt as if I was in a cocoon. I felt my breath as Daddy started to speak very quietly. I thought he was just going to say a few words. Then as he went on, I figured he was just going to speak a few sentences. But as he continued to talk, I realized that I had finally drilled a hole in the dam. He was far away, back in time, reliving what had happened to him. And it was all spilling out. This is what he said.
That's a wonderful reading and a great setup to the book. Tell us a little bit about how this book came to be.
Right, so it basically came out of, I call it a quest, my quest to find out who my paternal grandparents were, because my father never talked about it. And I later learned that that was a common phenomenon among people of color in the South from his era. As a matter of fact, Essie Mae Washington Williams, in her book, Dear Senator, she's the estranged daughter of the South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond, or the ex-South Carolina Senator.
Okay.
Yeah. Mixed race daughter of Strom Thurmond. And she's quoted in her book titled Dear Senator, a memoir by the daughter of Strom Thurmond, that sex and miscegenation were powder keg topics in the South. And once that fuse was lit, the explosion could be fatal, unquote. So you could see how talking about those types of relationships could produce very harmful results. So that kind of cleared things up for me as to why he was so secretive.
But you moved to California. I believe your dad was in the Air Force. Is that correct?
Yes, he was initially in the Navy. He joined up at 17 and he served, I believe it was 16 years. While he was stationed in Spain at Rosas Air Force Base, I was born over there in Spain. We came back to the States in about 65. But after he got out of the Navy, he re-enlisted for another 4 years in the Air Force.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. And so this not talking about things, in theory, that would have changed, especially in the military. Now, I missed you in Europe by about 3.5 years. We got there in 69. And you wouldn't have recognized me because I was only 6 months old at the time. I didn't look quite the same. but um, but in in my experience, which again, I was young, you know, I didn't know everything. Maybe your experience was different, but it seemed to me that it was a very integrated world where it was very merit-based. And was that your experience?
Well, I'll say this about his knowledge while in the military. It's interesting you bring that up because he has told me a story. He's since passed away, but he told me a story that when he was in the military stationed overseas, he had need to request his birth certificate, maybe for a position or a promotion that he was seeking. And when he got it, he was surprised to see that his father was listed as some fictitious name,
Really?
that he did not know. So yeah, so he really was kept in the dark and didn't know who his father was until I revealed it to him after doing the research just around 2009.
Wow. And was he happy to have that knowledge? Because this is something that he had pushed aside his entire life.
Yeah, that's a good question, Laura. I can't say for sure that he was happy. He didn't show a lot of emotion when I told him the news, but I could tell you that the impetus for the research was based on some scant knowledge that he had when I was pressing him for who his mother was. He finally was able to give me a tidbit of information in that his mother was involved in an incident that sent her to prison in 1926. And his understanding was that she got in an altercation with some women in the neighborhood who were accusing her of sleeping around with their husband. I took that information and started doing research at the Mississippi Department of Archives and History and found a newspaper article and some court transcripts that actually attest to the fact that it was not quite the way he told me it was.
Was that because he didn't know or because he didn't necessarily want you to know?
I think it was because he didn't know.
Okay.
You know, his mother, he told me, when he would dare to ask who his father was, would tell him to sit down and shut up. Go somewhere, sit down, shut up, and don't ask about it. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier regarding the powder keg
Right.
that could be lit if you being a woman of color would dare to reveal who the father of your children was, if that person was a white man. And then especially in the case of Strom Thurmond, and then in my case, my grandfather turned out to be the warden of the Parchman Farm, the Mississippi State Penitentiary. So we're talking men of power, resources, and you know, that only made worse the potential consequences if you were to reveal who they were, because they did have some. It's interesting. It's interesting that both men did take care of their offspring. My father tells a story of two white girls who would come by the house and drop off food and clothing. And in the case of Strom Thurmond, S.E. Mae Washington Williams tells a story of him paying for her education and other needs. So there was that, I don't know if you call it a dichotomy or contradiction, but it was just that they didn't want it to be known, but they felt at least some sort of a burden or sense of responsibility to at least provide in some way, form, or fashion. I've done some research to try to find out who these two girls were, and the one living relative of L.T. Fox was his name. Could not determine who these girls would have been.
So this warden didn't have any daughters or nieces or household help that might have brought the food?
Well, you know, that's interesting. You should ask that. I mean, he if he did, we weren't able to nail down their identities, and so yeah, that's so
that's a mystery.
Yeah,
no, I wanted to ask you, how much of this book is 100% fact versus did you have to kind of conjecture some things?
Yeah, so we called it, or the
I should say known fact. Don't mean to
Yeah.
imply you're writing fiction because you're not.
I would say the bulk of it is based on true events, but obviously since we weren't there, we had to fill in the blanks in some instances with creative filler. We call the book, or the genre of the book, creative nonfiction. Yeah, so the question was how much of the book is based on actual facts and how much of it was creative. So if I were to put a number on it, I would say probably 85-15, 85 being based on official documents and 15% based on verbal history and then creative license.
Okay. Now, a major question I have is in the book, you say that he was working at the governor's mansion and a man came, said, I need to get some papers, show me where this room is, and then took advantage of her. Did you write that before you knew that it was the prison warden?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the research revealed that more likely than not, it wouldn't have been another prisoner because of the configuration of the prison and how the male inmates were kept separate from the females. So we figured that it had to be some sort of prison official, anywhere from the lowest rank of guard on up to whomever. I had no idea. We had no idea that it would have been the warden, who's the superintendent, the man in charge. But it made perfect sense. And then, so the book was finished before we confirmed that information. So after the book was finished, I was prompted to do a DNA test. And a gentleman from Illinois by the name of Bruce Kennemore contacted me on the DNA website, and he said, hey, we share DNA markers. I'm interested in learning who my African-American relatives are. Can we talk? So I had gotten other near misses before from the DNA website. So I thought, oh, this is just another near miss, but I'll go ahead and entertain him. So I said, okay, fine. Who are your family members, or what was your family name? And he said, well, my last name's Kennemore. He mentioned another name that I don't remember. And then the third name he mentioned was Fox. So I almost lost my lunch when he said that, because I
fell out of your chair. Yeah,
exactly. From the research that the superintendent of the prison, when my grandmother Bernice was incarcerated there, was named Fox, L.T. Fox. So that kind of tied up all of the research that we had documented in the book.
When I was reading your first reading, it actually felt a bit like I was sitting next to you in the car, because I'd been on that highway between Shreveport and Jackson, mostly between Monroe and Jackson, because I worked in Jackson for about a year and a half at the supercomputing center that's there in Vicksburg. So I either was at the Jackson airport or the Monroe airport and had been driving that highway back and forth. So as I was reading it, it was just kind of like, especially in the middle of the night, I'd been on that highway. I'd been, just kind of wondering if that drive was ever going to end.
Right, exactly.
Been on many like that. So before we go on to drink two, I did want to show off. We got some fun swag. These are nesting coffee cups, and then
Oh,
let me see if
wow.
I can. Yeah, I've been
I'll
having
have
fun.
to get those because I'm a coffee connoisseur.
Perfect. And then we got the other one I got faded, and so I added I love hosting books and brews on this one, and
Which we
got
have our t-shirts,
our
our official
matching
t-shirts.
t-shirts. So yes,
Oh, you have to tell me how I can get some of that swag.
That's
I
right.
will, yeah. And they actually originally say I was a guest on, and you can change it to anything I love listening to. So got to start
Definitely.
paying for the alcohol.
That's true. In all these drinks.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, plus all our snacks we can't drink on an empty stomach. So
So
Drink number two.
I'm using a coffee mug right now from St. Joseph's Plantation in Louisiana. Can you see it?
okay. Yeah, I
That's
can.
where
I
we
don't
filmed the trailer for the movie.
Oh, that is
And
so neat.
it's the same.
Okay.
It's the same location where they filmed 12 Years a Slave.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to listen to that. So what is drink number two? I mean, watch that. Look it up and watch it.
Yes. So I was taken by at the end of the reading number two. You had, said that it was like you had just been given a sack of gold by your father for all the wonderful, information you got. So I thought we should have a cocktail called the Pot of Gold, and so
Right.
I have that, and it happens to start with some Irish whiskey, because what drink named a Pot of Gold, would not start with a bit of Irish whiskey, of course. So,
And we are talking about strong stuff here. So
that's right.
Whiskey is apropos.
Yes, indeed. And then we go with a bit of lemon juice, fresh squeezed, of course. Now we're going to go back to our old standby, the ginger syrup. And we're going to put in about 3/4 of an ounce per cocktail of that. So this should have a nice ginger flavor as well. And then we're going to have some real fun in that we get to advertise our chickens that we raise here. And I'm going to be putting egg white in this, which will give, with a dry shake, a nice kind of a sweet foam on the top of the drink. And so this takes a bit of an ambitious shake. All righty. Well, I've done the dry shake, which you have to be careful in a shaker because the foam really produces some pressure on the inside of the shaker. And so you have to make sure.
Kind of messy right now.
Right. You have to make sure that it doesn't get, all over the place.
Yeah, don't mess up your beautiful, clean white shirts there.
That's right.
Right.
So we did get a bit of the nice foam on top. And then what we do,
There's more.
yes, we top it off with a little bit of gold foil, because this is the pot of gold aspect. So throw in some gold sprinkles on top.
Yeah, you can see the gold on top,
that.
can't you? Yeah, so
Yes,
this is like the kind of sprinkles you buy for cakes, things like that.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
It is a beautiful gold.
So that's our pot of gold.
Cheers.
Oh, man, that is so appropriate for this reading.
I think I got an egg mustache. This is delicious.
Does it taste a little like an eggnog, a spiked eggnog?
I wouldn't say that. The egg foam on top, it gives it almost kind of a meringue type feel, like on top of a lemon meringue pie.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you get that nice sweetness to it, which I find, very nice.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that's
not that
delicious.
thick consistency of an eggnog.
Right. Yeah, not that kind of milky.
Yeah, it's thinner than that, I think. It's been a long time since I've had eggnog, but it's thinner than that. So reading number two.
Okay. So this is Daddy opening up about his mother, Bernice. My mother, Bernice, was a beautiful Black woman. She kept a close watch on me. She spoiled me, really. She didn't allow her husband, George Johnson, to lay a hand on me. My brother, George Jr., and I got along pretty fine, but if it ever looked like Junior was getting too rough, Mama shooed him off me. I guess you could call me a mama's boy. I was always with Mama. Sometimes she even took me to work with her. She worked for a white sheriff cleaning his house. She'd sit me down and give me a cookie or a toy to play with and told me to occupy myself for a while so she could get her work done. When I went places with Mama, people were always stopping her on the street and remarking about me. They'd say I was a pretty child, and then they'd touch my soft curly hair and pinch my cheeks. Mama seemed real proud of me. She carried me around even when I was over 3 years old. It was like she was afraid something would happen to me, so she had to pay special attention and watch over me. She didn't treat my brother like this. I was always at Mama's skirt or sitting on her lap or being carried around by her. I think this annoyed her husband, George Johnson, no end. But one look from Mama and he shut himself up. I got the feeling they had some kind of a pact. I think maybe Mama's husband had caused her some kind of trouble in the past, and she now held this over him so he never caused her any more problems. So Mama got her way. George Johnson always treated me right, and I always called him Daddy. When I finally went to school, it was Mama who was the one crying. You know how little kids always cry when they go to school the first time. Well, I was happy to get to school and be with different people and just do something new. But Mama sobbed into her handkerchief the day she had to drop me off. And that first time, she waited outside all day just to make sure she was right there to take me home when it was all over with. All during my school years, the teachers always treated me different from most of the other kids. They treated me better because they thought I was cute. They were always feeling my soft, wavy hair and remarking what a fine-looking child I was. In those days, the light-skinned ones got special treatment. I didn't think then how the dark-skinned kids must have felt. I liked it that the teachers treated me special, but I was a good kid. I didn't cause fights, but I didn't run from them either. I guess if I had been a bad kid, the special treatment might have ruined me. But I had been treated special for as long as I could remember. It was strange to think that I was treated better than other people because of my light skin. It wasn't because of who I was or anything else about me. It was just my skin color. I was always treated like a pet by my teachers. I was treated like a prince by my mother, and I was eyed with suspicion by George Johnson. But he always treated me fine, and I loved my brother George Jr. We were always good friends. He didn't resent me because of my light skin. I think he just figured it would be easier to join the Fred Douglass fan club than to cause me any trouble. That's how I grew up, Lonnie. When he finished his story, we were 50 miles closer to Jackson, but I was no closer to learning the identity of his white father. That's the main thing I wanted to know, and the main thing Daddy had left out of his story. Keep going, Daddy. I got my foot on the gas and I'm going, he said. A long inhale on his cigarette and a slow exhale. You know what I mean, I told him. Close your eyes, he said. Take a rest. Not tired, ain't you? He said. I sat back and rested my head on the seat. In my mind, I went over every detail of what Daddy had just told me. I smiled to myself, feeling as if I were holding a sack of gold. This was how happy I was to finally learn something about Daddy's family.
That was wonderful.
Yeah. One of the things I find interesting is I know a couple of people who are adopted, and one of them very driven to find her background, her biological family, the story behind it. The other is like, I have my parents. What difference does it make? So I find it interesting that he was very much on the side of, I need to know. So there was this strong, at the time, anathema to, antipathy to blacks and whites having children together, being together, and yet he was treated better because, I think it was probably clear to everyone that he had a white father.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I would say so.
How do you explain that dichotomy?
Well, I'd have to take at face value what he said, and that's basically that it was based on his looks, that he was a cute baby, and people admired him for his looks, and the fact that he was quote unquote cute, and that got him favorable treatment.
Okay, so it wasn't so much about having, although he does say that the light-skinned people got better treatment in those days.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what he said. And so if you want to base it on maybe historical information, I would say that you could draw an analogy to during slavery times, the treatment that the house servants got in comparison to the field servants. And so then if you want to take it a step further than that, although the master of the house had access to all of the enslaved peoples, it wouldn't be a stretch to figure out that he had more immediate access to those that were working inside the house as opposed to in the field.
Mhm.
And so the offspring of those house slaves would naturally favor the master of the house, who would then bestow upon them more favorable treatment for obvious
Okay.
reasons.
Right.
And so, yeah, that would be, I think, the historical connection too.
Okay.
But I think, though, more than anything else, it is as simple as him being a beautiful child,
Okay.
a cute child, fair skin, long curly hair. And I think that, based on what he has shared with me, is the real reason he got favorable treatment. But in terms of, you could say both, because he told me a story of him receiving a football uniform.
I
and
remember this story in the book.
all indications were that it came from his unknown father, and he was so proud of it that he wore it in class, the full uniform, including the helmet. So
That's great.
you could imagine how the other boys in the class could view that as favorable treatment. So there's a combination of his looks and then resources being bestowed upon them that other kids of his era or in his purview would not have access to.
Right. Now, did Bernice, I'm kind of assuming that she never told her husband, George, how this child came to be. Can we assume that he could figure it out, or did he think she had cheated on him?
So that's the part where the creative license comes in at. We took creative license in describing her character, and so Daddy's description of her was that she was a quote unquote beautiful Black woman, but we took some creative license in describing her disposition as being one that was no nonsense, and then especially in light of the fact that she defended herself with a Spanish revolver. She wasn't a shrieking violet. You could surmise that from how she took action when she was accosted by the women with the knife. Okay, so with that information in mind, we developed this scene where she comes home from prison with my father in her arms as a baby, and George Johnson greets her at the front door and says, "Well, who is that?" And she brushes past him abruptly and says, "It's my baby. That's who it is. Now get out of the way." And she goes into the house, and that was that. And that was the end of it. And he took my dad as his own from that point on.
Mm-hmm. It's a remarkable story. It really is. Including the fact, I think it's pertinent today that this was a child she didn't exactly willingly, become pregnant with, and yet she apparently even favored him over her husband's children. And he accepted the child. It's, truly remarkable people. George obviously was very flawed because he had a lot to do with why this happened, but we'll get into that in the next reading. And we're ready for drink number 3.
Yes, I mean, the inspiration for this drink was a little tougher, of course, because of the reading. But I did manage to find a recipe that I thought would be good and that I could imagine in this struggle that occurs during this reading, that each of these women was angling to have the last word. And so I came up with a cocktail
Good
called The
assessment.
Last Word.
Very good assessment. I applaud you for that.
So we're going to start with some ice in a shaker. And this time, this is a very interesting drink. We're going to start with some gin.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff on this table.
Oh, you mean
Right.
you haven't come to the place where you can estimate how much you need?
Well, you end up kind of
He's an
transferring.
engineer.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I
I'm
got
the
it.
creative
Okay.
one. I'm the one who would just be dump, throw
got
it
it.
all in. That looks about right. Oh, that was a gallon instead of a pint. Oops.
Right. With
But
our
he's an
wonderful,
engineer.
right, with
Got
our
it.
wonderful gin, we're actually going to add some green chartreuse as well. This is an interesting liqueur in that this is made by Carthusian monks
Wow.
in near Grenoble, France, from 130 different alpine herbs.
My
The
goodness.
Carthusian monks, there are only 3 of them that share the recipe, and then they take a vow of silence. So they're never allowed to speak of the recipe ever again
Oh,
at
my
this point.
I
And
feel extremely privileged.
and so we start with that, then or add it to the gin. Then we have one of my favorites, which is a maraschino liqueur, which is Luxardo, and we're going to put some of that in with the gin and the chartreuse. So now between all those 130 alpine herbs and maraschino, we're going to have a lot of flavor in this. And
Wow.
of course, we're going to go to our old standby lime juice and throw a bit of that in there as well. And then we're going to shake all that together. And I'm going to put this in a coupe glass in order to make it a little bit easier to see, because the maraschino liqueur, of course, gives it a nice reddish color. And because we want to actually highlight the cherry in it, I'm going to add a couple of bourbon cherries into the mix of this drink.
Wow, bourbon cherries. I never heard of that. Is that a type of cherry?
Yes, it's a black cherry, which is actually steeped in Woodford's Reserve bourbon. So it's, they're delicious. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Cherries
It's-
are one of
it's-
my favorite fruits.
Yes, and so this drink should, I would guess, would be one of your
You would like
your
this
favorites
then, I
as well. So here we have the last word, and ready for Bernice and her interesting struggle in reading 3.
That is also really good.
Thank you.
That definitely has a little sharper taste.
Yes.
But man, I could drink that half the night, and I could drink the other one all night, which mathematically means I'm drinking 2 of them at once for half the night. This really isn't me. I swear it isn't. Go ahead with reading number 3.
Okay. It started in July 1926. This is our creative license in developing what Bernice would speak. Now, keep in mind, I've never met my paternal grandmother.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I don't even have a picture of her. I had a quilt that she had made, and somehow it got lost in our move from California.
That's tragic.
That's awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but-
who's on the book?
So that is a depiction of just a random person in the public domain that
Okay.
we used, whose dress and appearance would have resembled that of Bernice's at that time. We
That
surmised.
era. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. It started in July 1926. That's when my grandmother, Bernice Johnson, first had a confrontation with one of the Sanders women. Just 20 at the time, and about 7 months pregnant with her first child, Bernice was telling Carrie Berkeley, nee Sanders, to stay away from my husband. Bernice had twice seen Carrie following along after George Johnson. "What were you doing following along after my husband?" Bernice asked. "I was just walking up the road," Carrie replied. Bernice turned and left. The next day, she again ran into Carrie, who taunted her by saying, "Here I am. If you want to whip me, here I am." "I saw you walking with my husband," Bernice said, "and I asked you not to do it again. That's all," Then Bernice turned and went home. There was a lull. 3 weeks passed. Bernice forgot about the incident with Carrie Berkeley. August 16th, 1926, was a hot Monday in Jackson, Mississippi. The air was thick and humid. Bernice was suffering in the heat. She felt so heavy. She was large for 7 months along. There was no escape from the heat. She felt as if she was suffering. She decided to go outside and see if she could catch a breeze. Her legs and feet felt like lead weights. It was so hard just to walk. When she saw some friends gathered on Ella Lee Bradley's porch, she decided to stop and visit with Ned, Martha, and Ella Lee. Well, nobody ever wants to work, Ella Lee said. Bernice responded, nobody is working but my husband, and I don't have the things I want. If I was able to work, I would be working. Just then, Carrie Berkeley rushed up to the porch. Who in the hell are you talking about? She said to Bernice. Carrie, I am not talking to you, Bernice replied. You lying heifer, come on out of there, Carrie said. She was holding an open penknife wrapped in a handkerchief. Bernice saw an iron bar laying on the ground, but before she could pick up the iron bar, Carrie was stabbing at her with the knife. Bernice grabbed the iron bar and struck Carrie with it. Carrie slashed Bernice's arm with the knife. They battled back and forth. Carrie tried to cut Bernice, and Bernice tried to grab the knife. Carrie cut Bernice's hand and then turned and ran off. Bernice waited about 5 minutes and said to her companions, I'm going home. She brought the iron bar with her up the street. When she got a little above Elm Street at Railroad Avenue, Carrie Berkeley's mother, Carrie Sanders, grabbed Bernice and said, What's wrong with you? I didn't say anything to Carrie, Bernice said. Mrs. Sanders struck Bernice on the arm with a club. Carrie ran up and began to cut at Bernice with the knife, slashing Bernice's dress over and over. Mrs. Sanders held Bernice, who tried to fight her off, putting her arms over her stomach to protect her unborn child. Then Mrs. Sanders' daughter, Olivia, came out with a stick, and Bernice fought with her. Bernice's friend Estella arrived and held back Carrie and Olivia. Mrs. Sanders said, Why don't you whip me? Look who's got you. I got you. I'm going to cut that baby out of you, Carrie said to Bernice. Then Martha came over and pulled Bernice away. Go home, Martha said. Bernice went on home, but she carried the iron bar. In her condition, she needed protection. When she got to the corner, she turned and heard Mrs. Sanders say, We're going to kill her tonight.
The first question that came to my mind was, how in the world, I mean, you based this on the court transcripts, correct? You read them all.
The court transcripts, but even more telling, the newspaper article, which was the first-hand account of an unbiased party about what happened.
Did she get convicted of, was it murder, manslaughter? What was she actually convicted of?
She got convicted of the lesser offense of manslaughter.
How did she get convicted at all when this was so obviously a case of self-defense?
Because someone
that blows my mind. Because what?
Someone died.
Okay.
She was defending herself with a revolver. She swung around to shoot at her assailants, and there was the younger daughter of one of the assailants there, whose name was Letty Sanders. I think at this time she may have been between 11 and 14 years old, and she was struck by a stray bullet. She went to the hospital while Bernice waited in jail to find out what the outcome of her recovery would be, and she died. Had she survived, maybe that would have changed the outcome of her verdict. Go ahead.
Would it have changed the verdict if she had hit the women who were actually attacking her?
She did hit one of them. She hit the mother in the shoulder.
Okay.
But she did.
So I suppose, you know, you having been in law enforcement, what's your opinion? Should she have been convicted when it was so obviously self-defense?
I think that it was judging from the court transcripts, it was a fair outcome. They filed an appeal based on faulty jury instructions.
Mhm.
Okay. And I would have to be a lawyer to decipher the intricacies of that part of it.
Mhm.
But I think it was fair based on the fact that Letty died. That her sentence was not the more severe sentence of murder. They were able to overcome that based on the self-defense and the fact that she did not intend to kill Letty, but Letty
Right.
happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
And because there was a loss of life, I think that the 2 years that she got was fair.
And we learn in concealed carry classes, that idea of, you could be convicted of a crime if you brandish, if you shoot someone, if the force is out of proportion to the threat you were facing, a number of these things. So it does seem kind of, I don't want to say prescient, but at that time that they could have weighed all of that and come up with that kind of a verdict given all those other factors and things. Do you have a duty to retreat? These types of things in the face of force and stuff.
I was really impressed with how she handled this. And again, I wonder, is this a little bit of conjecture based on what you do know, or do you have reason to know that throughout her time in prison, to me, you're far more harsh on your grandmother than I am. I think she should have been let go. Here are these women threatening, maybe it's because I've been pregnant, I don't know. But if somebody's coming at me with a knife, threatening to cut my baby out of my stomach, man, I would shoot them too. And I don't think she should have been judged for that. I honestly don't. I feel bad for the girl who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But look at the situation she was in. So to my mind, she was very unfairly in this prison. And yet I love the way she always took the high road, and she was grateful for these other women who protected her from the men who came in at night seeking favors, to keep it very PG 10, 8. And she always said, despite how unfair this was, that her husband, George, was apparently being a little free with his attention and affection, if not his favors, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of got her into this mess in a lot of ways. And this was so unfair. They were attacking her. They were trying to, talking about killing her, cutting her baby out of her stomach. That's horrible.
Yeah.
And yet, instead of sitting in prison going, this is so unfair, I want to kill everybody who did this injustice, she keeps saying, you know what, there are people a lot worse off than me. I'm just going to do my work, do my time, and be home with my baby. And part of what helped her was the fact that these other women were protecting her because they admired her, because there was this hierarchy of admiration. And I want to hear, you tell the audience about this hierarchy of admiration in prison and why she was at the top.
Her character, and that goes into why I titled the book Reason to Fight. It was all about her determination to protect the integrity of her family. And that was her reason to fight. She was pregnant. She wanted to protect her family. And that was the crux of the whole issue that got her in prison. And we call it a double injustice. She was wrongly imprisoned and then wronged in prison. But yet in all that, she seemed to still hold on to this faith, this hope, and this overcoming spirit. Like you said, even though
I was so struck by that.
didn't bow her head and say, "Oh, woe is me." And then on a practical level, the creative license we took in describing how she would have returned home with the baby, Fred Douglas Johnson, my father, and brushed past her husband, ties into, I think, as you mentioned, about how all of this was brought about because of his possible indiscretions, right? So how dare you ask me now, after having been assaulted in prison, having gone to prison for something you started,
Right.
where did this baby come from, or who is this? And so their relationship had been described as being rocky from the outset, on again, off again. And so it was in keeping with with that characterization of their relationship, and even more so the impetus that got her into this mess to begin with, that we could justify her brushing past him and saying, in essence, don't worry about where this baby came from. We're going to take care of it as if it was our own, and him acquiescing to that, holding in, knowing that it was his fault.
A bit of a combination of just desserts and karmic justice.
Exactly. Him taking responsibility for that.
So, and I applaud him that it sounds like he did step up to the plate, and he did, even if silently, acknowledge, yeah, I caused you a lot of trouble. I caused you nearly life in prison, or even she could have had a death sentence at that time in history easily for shooting someone.
That's one aspect of it I hadn't thought about. I guess you're right. And but yes, I do applaud him for stepping up to the plate. As a matter of fact, a few years after she was released, the family, including George, migrated to Chicago. So that also attests to his taking on responsibility even to the next level by leaving their hometown of Jackson together and going to Chicago to start a new life.
Right.
Together.
So where can we find you online?
So I have a YouTube handle at Hiram Johnson 9986. And then I also have a website called relativerecover.com. And then my email address is jhiram32@gmail.com.
Very good. And Laura, I'm guessing you have a couple of links for us and yourself.
Because I'm trying to live about 15 lives all at the same time. Yes.
Indeed, she does.
I have a few links.
I get to be married to most of them, at least.
Like I've got a split personality or something. I don't. Record, I don't. You can find us at booksandbrews.net. You can find me at lauravosika.com. V as in Victor, OSIKA. You can find us and the animals, including the ram who trampled me, but he got his just desserts. He's in freezer camp now.
Yes.
At glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com. And you can find our sponsor, gabrielshornpress.com. And all of these sites are at Twitter, at Facebook, it's X now, at X, at Facebook, at, I believe they're all at Instagram too. So that's where you can find us.
And I'm going to go, far out on a limb again and say that we have, in addition to Hiram, another interesting guest coming up next month. Who could it be, Laura?
Yes, we do. So Sam Ritchie has a book called Echoes Within Walls. Yes, they do talk. It is about her experience as a realtor when she began to be aware of the energy she was feeling in houses. I find this very interesting because of some of my own experiences with houses. I don't think I'm particularly, whatever the word is for sensing spirits, but I've had several houses, but one in particular out in the Seattle area where everything was great. It was a beautiful house, lots of new stuff done. It was going to be our first house when my children were young. And as soon as I went to the basement, there was such a strong presence. I said, there's no way we're buying this house. And then later, when my kids were much older and I was single again, there was a house in, I want to say, Greenfield, Minnesota. It was a fantastic house. It had room for my 9 children. It had all these additions. It had lots of bedrooms. It was in a small town, which I wanted. Although my son at the time said, we cannot move to a town where our family actually increases the percentage of the population, which we literally would have done. With 9 children, I literally would have increased the percentage of population. It was that small. But I went with my daughter and a couple of my sons later to look at it more. It was just a lockbox and we could go in by ourselves. And they loved this place and they ran all over. We spent 40 minutes in there. And at about the 40-minute mark, I started feeling upstairs, especially in one bedroom, it's time to go now.
Oh, wow.
And I asked my daughter later, I was trying very hard not to ask any leading questions, but like, how did you feel about that house? And she said, there is something very wrong in that red bedroom. Don't buy it.
Oh.
And that was exactly the bedroom I felt it.
Well, let me ask you this.
So,
do you think those feelings could have come from the fact that someone may have passed away in the house?
it's possible. It was an interesting thing because in one bedroom there were like 500 dead flies. I mean, it was kind of weird that maybe they just sprayed fly killer. I don't know. Maybe someone died there, but she and I, without having talked about it, we both got the very same feeling that upstairs is a little iffy, and this red bedroom at the top of the stairs especially. And it killed me to pass on that house because it was only $50,000 and it was a huge house. And the kitchen was brand new, remodeled. It was absolutely gorgeous. It had the room my kids needed. But so I did finally say I'll buy it when I come back from my daughter's graduation. We were driving to New York for that. But by the time I got back, somebody else had made an offer. And there was a little bit of a shoot. I missed a 50,000, something I could afford, big enough for my kids in exactly a small town. And yet there was the relief that there were so many reasons practically that I wanted this house. It was so perfect. And yet there was that question in my mind, am I moving my kids? I felt something up there, and so did my daughter. So that's kind of what Sam Ritchie deals with. Very interested to hear her story. So that is next week. So thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.